The frost smoke from his nostrils turned to dust before it reached the ground. The air cut his throat when he drew it in. He kept his mittens over his mouth for a moment, then lowered them to look across the river flat. The snow was hard as stone, the surface crusted and blue in the early light. He walked toward the snare line, every step giving a dry squeak under the fur boots. His eyelashes felt wired with ice. Breath went shallow to save warmth. On the far side of the frozen river, beyond the drifted willows, something large shifted its weight, a mound that shouldn't have moved. He stopped, watching the stillness close again around it. The cold made thought slow, but one fact remained clear. Whatever was there was heavier than any man, and it had come through the storm alive. The cabin was a low shape against the white field, walls of pine sealed with dark moss. Frost grew from the inside seams like gray fungus. The stove breathed slow, iron ticking as it cooled. Batsaikan melted snow in a dented kettle, watching it turn from white crust to clear water, then to faint steam. He poured a little on the rifle bolt, wiped the oil that had gone thick as tar, and worked the action twice. Metal still dragged. Mikhail stepped out to split wood, 5 minutes each turn. No more, after that. Fingers stopped listening. He carried the logs inside, set them near the stove to sweat dry, then rubbed his hands until skin burned back to color. They ate a few dried fish, weighed the flour left in a canvas sack, and said nothing outside. The wind shifted and brought a hollow scent from the river bend. Mikhail went to check the traps. When he came back, he carried no animals, only a strip of birch bark and a look. Behind him, snow prints ran deep and far toward the willows. He set the bark down on the table and said one word quietly, as if the cabin itself might listen. Moose. They began to lay out gear. Rope, knife, sled, spare mittens, each move careful, slow, saving warmth. The cold pressed against the walls like another body waiting to come in. They sat by the stove, hands around tin cups, weighing the choice without words. Hunt or starve. The air inside the cabin hung still, every exhale leaving a slow ghost above the metal pot. Batsaikan checked the rifle again. The firing pin moved like frozen bone. He held the bolt over the stove lid until it steamed, then wiped it dry with a wool rag. Metal sweated, then froze again in seconds. He tried once more, patient, deliberate, until the motion felt clean enough to trust. Mikhail dragged the sled out and tipped it on its side. The runners had grown dull with frost. He rubbed them with a lump of bear fat from a jar, pushing the grease in with bare fingers until they burned, then wrapped his hands back into mittens before the cold bit through. Light seeped in gray and thin, the kind that never warms anything. Beyond the window, the snow turned yellow under the low sun, then began to pale again toward dusk. They both knew what the light meant. Only a few hours to move, shoot, and return before the frost made their hands useless. One wrong pause, one slip, and the cold would take what it wanted first. The fingers, then the lungs, then the rest. They left the cabin before the light strengthened, sled rope tight across their chests. The snow crust held their weight, groaning in small shifts as they moved through the open marsh. Every breath felt counted, drawn in with care, let out slow to save heat. The first sign came near the willows, a patch of scraped bark, pale and wet against the gray trunk, a strand of coarse hair caught in the resin. Batsaikan touched it, rolled it between fingers, still warm. A little farther on, the snow held a round depression where the animal had stood to urinate, steam still faint in the air before freezing mid-rise. They followed the trail across the flat, each step sinking deeper where the moose's hooves had broken through. Muscles began to ache under the wool and fur layers. Sweat formed, then froze along their backs. The sled rope cut grooves across their shoulders. Mikhail slipped on a patch of buried ice. The rifle swung forward, hit the ground butt first, and the stock cracked along the grain. He knelt, holding it like a broken limb, and breathed slow until he steadied. Batsaikan watched, then nodded once. They kept moving. The light dimmed without color. By dusk, the trees began again, thin birch giving way to pine shelter. Beneath the thick branches, they saw the shape. A dark mass half covered in drifted snow, breath rising in clouds. Antlers tipped with frost, a bull, heavy enough to feed them through the month. It shifted its head once, unaware of them yet, the weight of its life measured by the cold air between them. They waited for the animal to turn, 40 meters, no more. The wind moved from their backs toward the trees, thin but steady. Batsaikan raised the rifle, braced his elbow against his knee, and let his lungs settle. The cold made the sights tremble with each heartbeat. The shot went out clean, flat, no echo. The moose surged forward, snow spraying in heavy arcs. For a moment it looked unhurt. Then the front legs folded. Then the whole mass crashed through a drift and stopped. Silence after. They stood still until breath returned. Then they crossed the space in slow, small steps, each foot placed carefully on crusted snow. The bull lay tilted on its side, chest deep in powder. A dark pool spread under the ribcage, half liquid, half crystal, blood freezing before it reached the surface. Batsaikan found a branch and prodded the neck just below the jaw. No flinch, no eye movement. Field check done. The animal's hide already stiffened. Steam frozen to hoarfrost around the wound. The light fell fast. The air thickened, sharp and metallic. Mikhail flexed his hands, but the fingers moved slow, skin white at the joints. The rifle metal had already burned a gray patch into his glove. They both knew they had minutes before cold took their strength. They stood over the body, two small figures beside 4 tons of frozen life. The temperature still dropping into night. They worked without talk. The hide came off in thick, rigid sheets, edge of the axe dulling against frozen hair. Steam rose from the first cuts, white against the dark ribs, then vanished as frost took it. The muscles stiffened before they finished the front quarters. Each blow sounded like striking stone. They sawed through the spine, slow, measured, keeping balance so the carcass wouldn't roll. When the pieces loosened, they dragged them clear and hung slabs from low willow branches, high enough to keep wolves from reaching. In this cold, the meat would freeze hard within an hour, safe for days. The main quarters went onto the sled, layered with bark to keep from sticking. They pulled in turns, one walking, one breathing, so the heart could settle between hauls. The cold made their faces rigid masks. Sweat turned to ice beads along the collars. By full dark, they reached the cabin. The air inside felt thick, warm enough to sting. Batsaikan set a small cut of meat near the stove, turning it until the ice melted off. He sliced it thin with the same knife, dropped the strips into the kettle, and sprinkled salt from a tin lid as it boiled. A pale fat ring gathered on the surface, hardening even before he stirred. The smell was faint, animal and clean. They ate leaning forward, letting the steam brush their faces, eyes half closed, not in rest. But in the simple fact of being fed, they ate in silence. Each bite took time, teeth slow from the cold, jaws heavy with fatigue. The meat gave no comfort beyond warmth, but it was enough. The room held the mixed smell of boiled fat, smoke, and iron. Frost still rimed the inside of the window when the plates were empty. They sat for a long while, listening to the faint hiss of the stove metal contracting. Outside, the wind scraped against the log seams, steady and low. Morning came gray and unchanged. The cold waited at the door, exact as before. Batsaikan rose first, pulled on the stiff boots, checked the firebox, then stepped outside to clear his lungs. The frost smoke from his nostrils turned to ice dust before it reached the ground. He watched it drift away in small clouds, no longer surprised by the silence it left. Behind him, Mikhail moved inside the cabin, repeating the same motions. The day began again. Same cold, same light, same breath. Only now there was the quiet certainty that they would endure it. One more morning, one more season, as long as their hands could still move.